Back live with you tonight, you're on In Focus, and thank you for joining us. A legal action against Eskom, the Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, looming this after both parties failed to meet the 20th of January deadline to respond to a letter of demand from various organizations. They demanded that load shedding be stopped with immediate effect. If not, a full explanation as to why must be provided. Joining us now for more on this is Build One South Africa leader, Mmusi Maimane. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and good evening to fellow South Africans. Great to be here.
Well, first and foremost, let's look at the statement that came out on the 17th of January following your letter of demand. Is that the end of it? Is that the only response that you received?
Certainly, and I think the response that came after the 20th was even more offensive, because it made the case to say they needed time to consider the questions that we'd put to them. Now, load shedding has been a reality of our country since 2007. And when you ask a basic question like, what is a plan, you can't have only now starting to think about it as a start. Secondly, and more crucially, it indicates the sort of lack of accountability that the government wants to put on citizens. It says to them, we will dismiss out offhand what you are asking us for, and we will make decisions accordingly. So I felt it was crucial that we take appropriate action, and that's why, given the circumstances of where this country finds itself, where load shedding is costing us at least 1% of GDP annually, is what most people are estimating, 4 billion rands a day, that in fact we need to take a court action. If Parliament can't hold them accountable, the courts need to be able to direct this government to act accordingly.
So the president cancelled his trip to Davos, and he spent a week, it seems, consulting with opposition parties and a number of role players and so on and so forth. And we've been reading a whole lot of reports about those meetings, and all of them conclusively to a point saying, well, nothing new really as a plan was given to the president except for the 10-point plan which was given to us back in July. And from a conversation I heard you saying earlier on, you're saying they are literally shoving this plan as if it's the only thing that we can do, or otherwise we must just suffer load shedding.
Look, I mean, I think, first of all, I still don't see why the president stayed at home, other than saving us on hotel costs, etc. I would have hoped by now he has a deep appreciation of the impact load shedding is having. You know, during COVID times, we had family meetings, and he would address and give us an update as to the number of lives, livelihoods, etc. Load shedding must be treated in exactly the same manner, because in all fairness, it violates constitutional provisions of the right to health, the right to education, safety. As you drive through the neighborhood of Johannesburg, you appreciate how vulnerable citizens are. They're sitting at home in the dark. You can't, people are telling me, I was in Soweto, people are telling me, I'm living hand to mouth because you can't store anything. So this is a crisis, and businesses are shutting down.
Yeah.
Yet the president cancels a trip and has not addressed our nation. He might argue, I went and addressed the ANC's conference in Bloemfontein, but he hasn't spoken to ordinary citizens. To the point about the plan, the ANC simply doesn't have a plan. I don't think the president went to a plan 6 months ago. He's now reheated that and put that forward. And the plan basically says, let's keep load shedding. Hopefully renewables will rescue us. But at a current economic energy mix, 67% of our power is through coal. Renewables are below 9%. For us to be able to get the appropriate mix to stabilize the grid isn't going to be a matter of the next number of years. Yeah. It's going to be a decade. So it's key that we ask our genuine questions. Where are we refiring old shut-down coal plants? Yeah. Why are we not integrating small nuclear reactors so that we can stabilize the grid? Why are we furthermore not putting critical infrastructure of places like, reservoirs for water, schools, hospitals, so that ultimately those are not operating on the same grid? And if you are willing to be courageous enough, I wonder whether it shouldn't be considered that the two massive oil smelters that we've got, iron smelters, should not be taken off the grid, given their ability of consumption. Yeah. That would free up a potential of energy that we could feed back into the grid.
We'll talk about that a little bit more and what would that look like. But let's say you get to the courts and you're asking the courts Eskom must not implement the NERSA's 18.65% tariff increase. And you are met with an answer from Eskom, which is what we had the chairperson of the board saying now, that, well, this is a legal matter. It's in the laws how this whole tariff thing is worked out, is regulated. Yeah. What really is being asked of Eskom at this particular point, except for the fact that it has run its legal course, is to cushion the consumers from the impact. So we must just really work out how we implement it. But to implement it is legal, is above board, is what we will do.
Well, I think, first of all, just because a decision is made through a particular process does not make that decision rational. We've seen in the last while increases by the Reserve Bank on interest rates, which is an indicator of increasing inflation. You add 18% to input costs such as energy, which is at a baseline. Because remember, a municipality has to add an additional 4% to curb its own costs. So
yeah, if it is 4%.
Whatever,
yeah.
you know. So for an ordinary citizen sitting at home, this is an additional 23%. For an ordinary business that's baking bread, that's 23% that they have to contend with, which they're going to pass on to the consumer. So why would a decision, even taken in the process that they have, with poor public submissions, ultimately be deemed rational in a context upon which we believe they have now been granted an opportunity to double energy every 4 years for a service that is halving? This is economic sabotage. This is completely in the face of an economy that is struggling, and you are simply destroying it. Yeah. So my argument holds that we should go to the courts to declare the irrationality of that decision. And furthermore, what we ought to be asking for is to go, given the state of play, you can't keep a bloated government that's relatively corrupt. Where are the additional cuts that we need to make so that the consumer is not the underwriter of government's failings, but that the state actually does it?
So somebody could argue, say, well, Mmusi Maimane and your team, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're saying, one, let's revive old shut power stations, let's put nuclear reactors, let's secure critical infrastructure, all these things that you're asking for are going to need money. And we're saying we need to recover some 618 billion or 816 billion, I'm not sure, but something to that effect. And we need this terrifying.
The issue they're most afraid to deal with is to answer whether or not, head count-wise, Eskom has got an excess of manpower or not. They won't touch that because the unions are part of the alliance. What they will not touch is they will not go out of their way to say, what are some of the government processes that are wasteful, that they're not willing to sacrifice? And it seems that they've gone head down the road to say, preconditioned on load shedding, we can aggressively introduce IPPs. And I think that's a bad direction. I'm a supporter of renewable energy, but at the same time, it has to be phased in over a period of time. So whether I accept it or not, you are not going to ask consumers who are already stretched to underwrite Eskom thanks to government failure. So there is a way of funding it. There is a way of extending particular loans. And I think ultimately, we cannot be blamed as consumers for a government that's been dysfunctional.
What do you think about the president's statement yesterday? Is he kicking for touch? I mean, he knows very well that Eskom needs that money, but he goes to the ANC conference, be it a political platform, whatever platform he's talking at, and he says, well, I've made a request to them. I said they must consider not implementing this now. I mean, from my own assessment, it's the president wanting to say, well, I told you my hands were tied. It's Eskom's decision now to make. I have asked them as the president, but look, they're implementing it.
I hope the president will come and join our court action if he's that serious, you know. Because I think in his submissions, so he's cited as one of the respondents, in his submissions he needs to stick true to his word. Because what we've seen of President Ramaphosa is that often you find inside the ANC's conference he has a particular statement, but actually when it comes to the actual implementation of the work, it doesn't work like that. So I'm inviting him and I'm challenging him here right now on this show to say he must come and join our court action if he's serious about halting it. If he's not, then he must oppose it and join those who say 18% must be increased, and then let's see it out in court. But more seriously, I think he must also continue to task the Minister of Finance, Gordhan, to say we've got to make the appropriate budget adjustments. And there is a lot of wasteful expenditure that is filled into the system anyways. So we need to act against the state so that the citizen is free to be able to be empowered, to be able to do what they need to do. So I'm challenging the president to say, put your money where your mouth is and come to court and join the action to oppose 18%.
Other opposition parties are saying, well, it doesn't matter really what we do at Eskom. We could put Elon Musk there. We could put Warren Buffett. We could put whatever leader we can think of in business to run Eskom. The current model of a sole entity producing energy for this country is just not going to work.
I disagree vehemently. I think that countries all over the world have to manage complex systems. We have a good baseline, but we've got to make brave decisions. And some of those pertain to being able to go, how do we set up a SADC integrated grid? Ask Mozambique and Malawi to be able to import energy that could be supplied through gas. That would be a strong decision that would help stabilize the grid. What rebates do we give to citizens who are augmenting energy, putting solar panels, etc.? That would help. What decisions do we make, as I've already highlighted, around SMRs? And how do we, over a long period of time, say, if any South African who's sitting here is able to produce effective storage so that we use solar and other pieces of technology, let those people come forward so that we can put energy back to the grid. We're talking about a shortfall of just under 20 gigawatts of power, and therefore we need to be able to augment that and ask people to come on board.
Yeah.
South Africans are innovative, they are available, they can come on board, and internationally, this is not a new problem. Countries have faced this. We mustn't allow ourselves to this victimhood that says no one can fix it. It's not impossible. It is possible, and that's why we have to put the right leadership in place to be able to transition that. So on a skills level, I'm challenging that when we appoint the new CEO, best the new CEO not be appointed on the basis of engineering capability so that they can lead the next transition of Eskom. Rather than us simply just going, we'll put a board of our own favor and a leader of our own favor who will do what we want. We should get leadership and a board that has engineering capability, financial capability, so that we can steer the entity in the right direction.
So you mentioned that turning off of the smelters. Irvin Jim earlier on was saying that we must reject outright this concept that we must live with load shedding. They are asking us to numb ourselves, to say, well, this is our reality for the next 24 months. He says if we keep up with that, we will deindustrialize this nation in the next 24 months. Is that the same thing that you're saying? Switch off smelters?
I hold a similar view. We've got ourselves headstrong at saying load shedding is the only panacea at this point in time. And given that this is a problem that if you are a 16-year-old teenager, you would have never known a year in your life where there was no load shedding. I mean, let that sink in. So, all fairness, if that is the only solution, well, we're going to have it for the next 10 years. And I'll tell you why I say that. Because often when people introduce load shedding, other industries occur. We saw this in Nigeria, where ultimately parallel industries are created, and any leader who steps up to say, I'm going to fix load shedding, those industries act against them. And then you're stuck in a double bind where you say, well, I can't lose those jobs who are dependent on the presence of load shedding. We're seeing it in Gqeberha, where we're seeing water shedding, where ANC councillors are now selling water and destroying particular infrastructure that deals with water so that their businesses continue. So we have to curb it now, or we create a new normal which we will never be able to undo. Nigeria is very instructive in that, and other African states have demonstrated that. If we do not act soon on this issue, it has a chronic effect that will keep us in load shedding for generations to come. So
how would switching off those smelters really help us? Because, I mean, in a sense, you are shutting some industries there. I know they're saying apparently those smelters, I think they say they can power the whole of the Northern Cape.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So I think if you are able to reduce demand on those, I mean, if you're considering we're spending 4 billion rands a day thanks to load shedding, surely the cost to those businesses can be underwritten by just that exercise alone. Because it's not as though these are in a low demand cycle, low GDP growth, that there's such high demand. as things sit at the moment. So I think that is one component. I'm not saying that's the only solution that's on the table, but it's but one of them, because I think we could financially afford that rather than destroying the entire value chain of the economy. And furthermore, I do hold the view that if you then augment using different types of technology, you certainly can see your way through load shedding without making it normal. Of which, if you remove the smelters as one component, other aspects is how do you incentivize industries to be able to augment their energy supply, sell back into the grid? How do you allow certain municipalities who have the capability to be able to procure energy elsewhere? We've already been engaged with energy experts to say there is a wheeling of energy, which is a selling of energy as a stock market, where people who've got available or excess energy can be able to trade it, and available buyers are able to come and purchase it as an offtake from that. And through that transaction, we're able to free up the Eskom grid. Yeah. So we've got to be innovative.
Thinking in that, one energy expert saying part of the challenge is that we've not even begun to think how do we buy electricity from households that are going to produce excess.
We won't be able to do so because we've got a government that, with respect, is stuck in the past. It cannot imagine a future for all South Africans. And so naturally, you've got political leadership that is, in some instances, focused on private interests, and in other instances, incapable of just tabling a plan for the future of energy in this country. I think we need new leadership. I think we need new declarations as to how we're going to go. Of course, we're going to transition into a much more sustainable energy grid, but we're going to have to map out a way from that and ask all South Africans to put their hands in being able to contribute to that, rather than putting up with load shedding.
Mr. Maimane, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much
for
coming on, my brother. That's Mmusi Maimane, the leader of Build One South Africa.